Well, before we get to this week's teaching, I want to give us a little update on They Devoted Themselves. First of all, as was our practice last summer, this summer we are taking the month of August off. Actually, a little more than that. We'll be back in the second week of September. And so if you're using these videos in your churches, you can plan for that summer break. Secondly, that also means that yes, we are returning for a third season. I mean, why wouldn't we? These have been wonderful gifts to our community and even those beyond our community. So yes, we will be returning again for a third season in that second week of September. And thirdly, then, that means that we need your support. Would you be able to give to support the production of these videos? Our budget is about $12,000 and we're hoping to fundraise a good portion of that. All the giving links are in the description down below, and it would be just a real wonderful thing if you could support this. So thanks so much for that. And with that, let's get into this week's teaching.
Have you ever been to a party where you didn't expect much, or you don't have any expectations at all, but upon arriving, you were just blown away by the love and care and just this incredible meal, and you just felt like you were family, that you were home? I remember one time I was in Mexico City, and we were invited into this birthday party. We weren't sure what to expect, but upon arriving, the host family invited us, in great conversations, and they invited us to the garage for some food, and I was so blown away. It's this meal called taco al pastor. It's this giant slab of marinated pork with a pineapple on the very top, and it's slowly roasted, and the flavor and the juices and the aroma just kind of flows out the entire garage. We walked through the line and they were kind of cutting up the pieces of the meat and with the pineapple, and they're placing it on the taco. And you're enjoying that richness of the food with the host community, with the host family. And we were laughing, we were sharing, and this kind of deep life on life was happening. I was blown away that within an hour we were like family with this host family. We were strangers, but now we're family. Today we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 10 verses 40 to 42. A relatively short passage, but it's a passage that describes this practice of hospitality. Jesus is actually describing his sending of the 12 disciples. They're being sent out. They're taking the good news. They're taking, how Jesus has invited them to heal and to restore and to be a part of the people. In verse 40 to 42, I'm going to read for us what the scripture says. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. Anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly, I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. As Jesus is preparing his disciples, he's explaining to them this incredible practice of welcoming, this extension of hospitality. He says, whoever welcomes you, he's just telling the disciples, don't only just welcome you as an individual or the pairs, but they're actually welcoming Jesus, which ultimately welcomes God himself. This practice of welcoming is not just these elaborate meals or this robustness of what people are bringing people into, but even in verse 42, a cup of cold water. These little things that people could do is this extension of welcome. And of course, Jesus describes that the reward isn't just like a monetary reward, but the blessings of how the good news begins to transform and change us. Henry Nouwen, an author, in his book Reaching Out, he describes hospitality in this way. He says, hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. So hospitality isn't primarily this meal, this kind of extension of bringing people into your home, but it is actually making space, nurturing space where change can happen. And this is not like a physical change, but it's the relational change. It is the spiritual change that begins to happen. And so today, as we look at Matthew chapter 10, I want to work out with us two angles of looking at hospitality. The first is to look at being welcome, as recipients of hospitality. Just as Jesus is describing to his disciples that they will go and they will experience the welcome. In verse 9 to 14 in chapter 10, just before our passage today, Jesus is describing for us, as Jesus is describing to the disciples that as you are going out, take nothing. No gold, no silver, no shirt, no extra shirts, no sandals, no staff. You will receive as you enter into those spaces. And if people don't receive you, then take the peace, his peace, with you. Learning to receive and learning to be welcomed and welcome into the hospitality of other is an incredible lesson of disruption. Oftentimes in Christian circles, I believe that we want to be the welcoming one. We want to be the one that is hosting and receiving. There is a certain level of power and control that, we can set the space, we can think about the agenda. But here, this kind of opposite view of hospitality, where we are recipients of hospitality, being invited into other people's lives and homes and communities. There's a level of humility to this practice of receiving hospitality. I wonder for us as we think about this being invited into others, what stories or what spaces do we think about? It's very easy for us to think about just being invited into someone's home and having a meal. But this kind of receiving hospitality from others also can be seen in other spaces. Sometimes, as I think even in my own neighborhood, it isn't so much about entering into people's homes as it is the space in our sidewalks, in our in parks, and even sometimes in third spaces of coffee shops. That as we are connecting with other people, the hospitality that we receive is actually sometimes even being invited into people's lives. Their trials, their joys, their excitement, the receiving of hospitality is, like Henry Nouwen describes, the environment where change can happen. As strangers, now we are becoming friends. As strangers, now we're beginning to understand the depth of what we are experiencing. And it's quite mutual at times. The other side of welcoming. This passage really emphasizes on the disciples being recipients of hospitality. But as we think on the flip side, there's also the extension. The people who are receiving the disciple is a practice of hospitality itself. To extend the welcome, the care, and to create this environment. To nurture this environment, as Nouwen describes, where change can happen. We too are practitioners of hospitality. That we recognize that it's not a power over somebody. It's not that we have this meal, we have this space, and we're just giving to those who don't have. But it's recognizing the good news of Jesus is an extension. It's like the table. Jesus' table is an extension and an invitation for others to experience Him. We recognize that we are recipients of Christ, and that's what we offer. As I think about how the practice of welcoming, the practice of hospitality is so disruptive, I think about, when we first moved into the neighborhood, we didn't know many people. In fact, we didn't know anyone in our community, but we really wanted to. So we decided that we we're going to host ourselves and welcome to the neighborhood party. So we prepared some food, we prepared some drinks, we had some flyers. I took my then 2-year-old with me because 2-year-olds are super cute. So you hold on to them and then you take them door to door and you're extending flyers. Most people, were kind of suspicious of what our intentions were, but we were trying to be honest. Like, we just want to be neighbors. We want to get to know everyone here. As the party comes to, we were kind of preparing, we're getting the food, the grill is on. I was feeling very anxious. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to show up because it's not really a common practice. But to our surprise, our entire row showed up. At different time, different people dropped in. I think by the end of the night, we had at least 40 people from around the community showing up and just kind of connecting and chatting. I remember somebody come up to us later and said, hey, thank you for doing that. We were so ecstatic because we've lived here for 5 years and we've never met so many neighbors before. In our time of just hosting this little party, we recognize that it is disrupting the norm. The hospitality, when it's practiced, it's beginning to change people. And I believe that as Christians, as we embody the goodness, the love, the truth, and the transformative ways of Jesus, the practice of hospitality begins to disrupt our community, and disrupt it in a way where the kingdom begins to emerge. Rosario Butterfield, in her book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key, she says, radically ordinary hospitality is this: using your Christian homes in a daily way. And I want to push that. It's not even just our Christian home, it's just how we live this hospitable way that seeks to make strangers neighbors, and neighbors family of God. That as we are thinking of and practicing this hospitality, both extension and receiving, we want to see that strangers, sometimes enemies, become neighbors, and neighbors becoming the family of God. So friends, as you gather in your groups, I want to encourage you to kind of begin to discuss and wrestle with hospitality. Where are those spaces that God's inviting you, both as individuals and as a collective group, that He is inviting you to practice this hospitality, to extend out, to make space, to see change, to recognize neighbors becoming family of God? And maybe it starts with the strangers. And also, where are the spaces that God is inviting you to? Where are those spaces where, God is opening up, where you are a recipient of hospitality? Whether it is just over coffee with someone, or sometimes it's even just birthday parties, our kids' birthday parties, or our neighbors' birthday parties. That those are the spaces of disruption that we are invited into, the stories of our neighbors, the stories of our community. I pray that you will learn and you will grow in the ways of hospitality, and that the stories will continue to be able to share with one another just how God is moving in your community.